This video is going to be very different from most people's first impression of the game, mainly because my first impressions of the game doesn't really start from just the demo. It starts all the way back in 2020 when the game was first revealed at the PlayStation 5 showcase. I remember watching the first Awakening trailer for Final Fantasy 16 and it piqued my interest instantly. But I immediately thought that this game wasn't going to come out anytime soon, mainly because Square Enix games just take so long to release. For context, Final Fantasy 15 was announced in 2006 under a completely different name, and ultimately the game launched in a way that made fans of the series extremely disappointed, as most of the content that was promised for the game either didn't make it into the final build or was extremely lackluster. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed what I played of Final Fantasy 15, but even I had some gripes with the game. So when Final Fantasy 16 was announced, you would think that I wouldn't want to get burned once again, and yet for some reason, for some unforespoken manner, I was instantly hooked. I read every interview, watched every trailer, and even went out of my way to read up on the lore of Final Fantasy 16, which isn't something that I usually do with a lot of video games. And after 3 years of waiting, 3 years of trying to find anything and everything I could about this game, did the demo live up to the hype and give me the feel that this game would be amazing? The answer is obviously yes. Quick summary for people who didn't play the demo yet: there are 2 demos that you can play from this game. The first being a prologue for Final Fantasy 16, which is a 2-hour introduction to the game that focuses on mostly the story. And the second part is more combat heavy, that really gives you a lot of freedom to play around with the game's mechanics if you'd like to. I personally played the game in 4K with the performance mode turned on, and immediately I thought the game looked stunning. Not just from the graphics, but the way certain colors, lighting, shading, everything looked perfect. It really made certain areas of the game look fantastic, and just watching a video on screen is really not enough to show off how amazing this game is. You really need to play it for yourself to see and get a full experience of the game. However, there is some noticeable things that I can indeed talk about when it comes to the performance mode. First, it isn't perfect. Yes, you're getting 60 frames, but depending on where you are and what kind of action is going on in the game, it does noticeably dip, but it doesn't go down past 30 frames per second, which in my book is a massive win, as some of the icon fights are large-scale, action-packed moments with so many particle effects. So to me, this wasn't really a problem at all. Fun fact, actually, while recording this video, they did announce that there is going to be a patch to make the performance mode a lot better, so these icon fights should look a lot better and should hold a suitable 60 frames per second, if not very close to 60 frames per second. The second thing that bummed me out a little bit was the fact that the cutscenes are hard locked to 30 frames per second. Don't get me wrong, these scenes look amazing, and honestly, I don't have a problem with it being in 30 frames per second. However, I still would have loved to see how cool it would have been to see a full 60 frames per second, even during cutscenes, and I am extremely okay with the cutscenes being in 30 frames per second. It doesn't bother me all that much. But when it comes to combat, there is a lot to talk about. When doing the prologue, there really isn't too many things that you can do, as it is the beginning of the game, meaning you don't have a lot of abilities to make use of the full combat, and it does feel very bare bones, which is a natural reaction to the experience when first playing the demo. However, when you get into the second part of the demo, you really start to get a full sense of what the combat is capable of. However, when playing both demos, I fell in love with this combat, regardless of if it was the beginning or within the end of it. It's not perfect, and there are still some things I need to get used to, but good lord, it felt satisfying to swing your sword, learning combos, using magic, staggering enemies, and just it feels so fun to use. Personally, I'm addicted to the combat like no other, and it feels super satisfying when you nail a parry or when you dodge at the perfect time to strike back at your opponent. The combat feels incredible, and every time I played the demo, I always wanted to improve to get a real grip on how you should be playing the game. And when it comes to the enemies, you're going to have your average gun that you simply beat up and pummel, but there are really cool bosses with insane designs with them. I noticed when fighting Benedicta that her combat changes the longer the fight is going on, and it never feels like the same patterns are being used all the time. Her combat grew and made me have to change my strategy when it came to approaching her in the combat, and I absolutely love this part of the game. And even using things like icon abilities really made me think a lot about when to use them and how I should combo with them in the game. It felt like, as a player, you had so much freedom, so much space to express your style of play. You can simply rush down the boss with all your might, or you can think about intricate combos that you would like to do to defeat the boss in front of you. The choice is ultimately up to you. Now, something I also noticed is that you can actually open up the skill tree in the second demo and unlock and equip abilities out of the 3 icon powers and completely change the way that you play the game. And oh my God, this has to be one of the best demos I've ever played, period. You can level up current skills so you can increase stagger. You can get new skills that honestly weren't even unlocked in the first place, and it just changes everything about the demo. Now, if we are nitpicking, my only problem with the combat is having the dodge button on R1. It personally feels kind of weird to me, as I'm normally used to the dodge button being on circle, but I was told by a friend that in the settings there are different control schemes that you can use if you really don't like this R1 dodge feature. I never changed it, as I personally really wanted to get a full grip of the default controls, and honestly, it's not too bad for me to use. It just feels a bit weird at times. But you know what's not weird? The story of this demo. Without getting into too much details about it, the story is absolutely phenomenal, and it shows. The story felt like I was watching a Final Fantasy Game of Thrones story, and I loved every single part of it, as it has so many things within the first bit of the game. We see love, empathy, sadness, jealousy, laughter, and just so much in the span of 2 hours. And man, it feels so good to experience something like this in a modern Final Fantasy game. I also have to give it to the voice acting, as most JRPG English dubs are either bad or very jarring. This game is not either of those, and I believe this is the first time I would actually recommend someone play the game in English rather than Japanese, and say that with confidence. And finally, it's time to talk about the music. It's goated. This is going to be possibly the shortest section of the video, as many people already know that Soken is just a musical genius. His work on Final Fantasy XIV shows light in Final Fantasy XVI, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but it's even better than that. I genuinely don't know how this dude does it, but my God, he is so good at making great Final Fantasy music. You know what? Just listen to this beautiful piece of music. Bottom of the line, the demo really showed me what is capable of Final Fantasy XVI. I'm honestly really excited for the game to show up and come out, and everything that I played within my first impressions of the game was absolutely a 11 out of 10 banger. If they can continue this pace, and hopefully the full game has something incredible to show, which I have no doubt it will, so I'm really excited to play Final Fantasy XVI. The game comes out very soon, and I, for one, am very excited for the full release of the game. For those of you who are interested in watching my playthrough of the game, I will be playing the game day one on YouTube, live here on this exact channel. So if you'd like to check me out, please go ahead and do so. As well, if you could just please hit the like and subscribe button for more Final Fantasy content here on the channel, it would super be appreciative and would help a lot. So we are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, so please, every single sub does matter. But without further ado, guys, my name is Adam, also known as V2, and I'll see you later.